Hi, welcome. I'm Michelle Anderson, the founder of Clarinet Mentors. Today I want to share with you what I think are some of the most important habits to succeed on the clarinet, or probably any musical instrument for that matter. I think if you're someone who likes to practice your clarinet, you're really going to enjoy this video because it's going to give you some pointers on how to do that a lot more effectively. Now, if you're someone who doesn't enjoy practicing the clarinet, this video is especially great for you. Now I can already hear it. You're waiting for me to say, because you don't have to practice to get good on clarinet. Well, I'm not going to say that, because I think any discipline in life where we're trying to achieve a set of physical skills and mental skills does take dedicated work. However, here's the good news. If you don't enjoy practicing, there's two thoughts for you. Sometimes we don't enjoy doing something that's not giving us good results. It's kind of human nature. If we try something and all of a sudden we have success, we get a little jolt of woohoo energy. So this might help you enjoy practicing more. But on a more practical point of view, a lot of people waste time when they practice. They might spend an hour in the practice room, but it's possible that a good chunk of that time is kind of reinforcing bad habits or the things that's making it more frustrating for them. So this will help make sure that you're really effective with your practicing. If you only like practicing for a short time, it'll ensure that the things you're doing are really helping you to improve your sound and your technique and have the results that you want. So let's dive right in. And I would probably hazard a guess that almost every master clarinetist in the world uses some of the techniques that I'm going to teach you today. And what this has to do with is how we learn as people, how we learn a musical instrument, and what the best way is to sort of set up our practice session. So I'm going to encourage you to be just a little more organized when you sit down to play your instrument on how you do it. So we're going to start with the very first thing that I think most clarinetists should start when they put their clarinet together, before we even play a single note. We've got it set up, I've got my reed on, haven't played a note yet. We want to really think about the sound we produce. So I'm going to just say the first thing we think about are tone habits, and I would say good tone habits, the things that make us sound best. And really good tone is a combination of how we hold our body, so that's posture, embouchure being the shape of our mouth, how we use our air, and the equipment that we play on. So let's assume we have equipment that works well for us. We want to make sure that the very first things we do emphasize proper air support and proper embouchure. And I'm going to put some links below this video to some other videos that really help give you some very specific tone exercises that would be great for this first portion of your warm-up session. So I want to make sure that the very first note I play is mindful, that I'm conscious of sitting with my ribs lifted up so that my blowing muscles are freely able to do what they need to do, which is blow very fast, focused air into the clarinet. And then I'm thinking of my good basic embouchure habits, pulling my bottom lip down, having my corners in. And a really easy way to start is just play an open G, which is the nickname for the G we play when all the holes on the instrument are uncovered. So before I play it, I'm going to sit up straight, make sure my shoulders are relaxed. I'm going to take a nice big breath, and again, some of the other videos that I'm linking to here will address really how we get that fast focused airstream. So I encourage you to watch those if this is new to you. But I'm just going to think about fast, steady air, and I'm just going to play that open G. Now, nothing fancy here. I'm just blowing it. If my reed needs any adjusting, I would do that at this time. I might say, yeah, that felt a little bit soft to me. I'm going to move it higher. Whatever adjustments you might need to make. Then we want to start taking it a little bit more advanced. So I'm a big proponent of using some form of long tone in your clarinet playing. And again, you'll see some links to further videos on that. But a real simple version I can explain right now is just to take that long note and go from loud to soft. And at the softest possible level, our tone tends to get airy and fuzzy. And our goal as a clarinetist is to speed up the little bit of air we're using to still do it with good tone. So to take any of those notes that you like and sort of think of them in this pattern. We start really loudly and strongly, and very quickly we diminuendo to about mezzo forte. Most of us can play any note with clear tone at a fortissimo level, but At some point along the spectrum, depending what note you're playing, it wants to fuzz out. And our goal is to just do a few minutes of long tones at the very start of our practice to push how softly we can go and still maintain good tone. So check out my link to other videos that will kind of expand on this, but I would say open G, then do an octave higher, maybe the high G. And I encourage you to really hang out at those softer levels where that's where the work is. Whatever point you hit that fuzzy spot is where you need to increase the speed of your air by taking your blowing muscles and activating them. Then I would say do a high C, thumb and register key. It's a fussy note, it's a harder one to do. And for those of you that are feeling super advanced, and I'll just say this is a hard one, what I call the embouchure tester fingering. Thumb, register key, first two fingers, leave this finger off, and these two. Sounds like a G sharp, but it's really fussy. To play that note softly, it likes to wimp out really easily. So I find if I can get that fingering playing at a nice soft level, my air is really warmed up, my blowing muscles are really warmed up, and I'm set to sound better at the rest of my practice session. So whatever we're doing for the first part of our routine, it's just trying to sound good, focusing on listening to our sound, using good air, using good embouchure, using good posture. After that, I just want to step back for a minute and talk about how we really learn as musicians. And I think a really important resource you can tap into is the part of your brain that kind of memorizes physical movement. A lot of people call it the musical autopilot. I used to nickname it the lizard brain, because even some of the most primitive lizards on Earth have part of their brain that sort of functions the same way. It's the part of our brain that lets us walk down the street without thinking about, oh, I swivel my shoulder, my heel bends, my knee bends, and if I don't counteract with the other shoulder, I'll tip over. You, at one point as a toddler, really struggled to learn how to walk, and you fell down a lot, and then you learned it, and now you don't think about it anymore. Well, we have these same things on a musical instrument. It's part of our brain that learns patterns, and they're physical patterns. So let's look at one of the most important physical patterns on any musical instrument, especially the clarinet, finger patterns. I believe that once we've put a certain combination of notes together enough times, it shifts from the thinking, conscious part of our brain into that musical autopilot part of our brain. And we can do it without thinking of it. And our goal is to put as much into autopilot as we can, our musical toolbox, we could call it, so that we don't have to think about it. This is absolutely one of the best ways to improve your sight reading and to improve your overall technique. And the good news is you can put things into autopilot brain very quickly if you have a good system for it. So what might be an example? If you're a very beginning clarinet player, these are probably the first 5 notes you learn, our open G, working down to the C below it. And if you are a new clarinet player, you might still have to really consciously think about those fingerings. So if you are, you're going to use this exercise to get these notes into your autopilot brain in about 5 minutes. Most of you may be more experienced. You might be able to look at this and kind of pick up your clarinet, and without thinking of it, because your fingers have already done that pattern so many times, you probably could do it without thinking. If you walked into my studio and I said, just play a G, F, E, D, C, you probably would just pick up your instrument and do this. Maybe without thinking about it much, just on autopilot. Now, could I do that more mindfully with smoother air and lighter fingers? Sure. But just as an illustration, kind of without thinking, yeah, I can play those 5 notes. Odds are you can too. Now, if you're more advanced, then let me show you an example of something that's a little bit more challenging. Now, there's lots of finger spots that would be considered more challenging, and it doesn't really matter what it is. The way we get it into the autopilot part of our brain, we have to break it into a small piece of about 4 or 5 notes, which is why this first sample is great. If you were a total beginning player, I would say take those 5 notes and play them slowly. being very mindful of your fingers, maybe looking in the mirror, and repeat it about 8 to 10 times. Now, for those of you who said, wait a minute, this is supposed to make practicing more fun. Well, I suppose that's a little tedious, but it only takes about 3 or 4 seconds to do each one. So even if I'm asking you to do it 10 times, it's about 45 seconds of effort. What starts to happen is in the middle of this process, and I encourage you to try this with any 4 or 5 note combos that you find challenging. Isolate them, play them slowly, about 8 to 10 times, until you notice that it almost feels like your fingers are moving on their own. You're kind of on autopilot and you're not thinking about it anymore. That's the moment it shifts from our thinking brain to wherever that part of our brain is that sort of takes it over for us. And there are kind of a couple ways that we can develop that toolbox. One is, again, going back to making finger patterns a very conscious part of the beginning of your practice session. We've done our tone warm-ups, now we go to finger patterns. Well, what can you play? All those things that you know you're supposed to do that you never found value in, practicing all your scales, all of your arpeggios, all of those common finger patterns. And on this page, I'm going to put a link to a download that has some great finger patterns that you could get started with. And it's a few pages, so the idea is don't do a whole bunch at once. Take a very short section and learn it really well. On day 1 of your practice session, take that 4 or 5 note pattern, do it 8 to 10 times till it feels pretty good. If you've done your 45 minutes or 45 seconds and you still feel like doing more, do the next 4 or 5 notes of a scale. Then you have a whole octave of that scale going up. Put it together. The next day, just reinforce it. On day 2, you don't have to do it 8 to 10 times. Just maybe 2 or 3 times until you feel like it's easy and effortless. Maybe for fun, repeat that scale throughout the week so it's firmly embedded into that autopilot part of your brain, but then add some new patterns. So we do some tone warm-ups, we do some finger pattern warm-ups. All this just helps us in the long picture. Now, the next kind of pattern that we use all the time as a clarinetist would be articulation patterns. Articulation is how we start and end the note. So on a really simple level, that's tonguing and slurring. We could also include staccato and accents and all the nuances that come into how we start and end the note. But initially, I think we could just look at tonguing and slurring patterns. And here are some samples of 4 note patterns that we could use. And the easiest thing perhaps is just to take the scale pattern we were just working on. So if I was playing a scale, I might try it all tongued. Ta, 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 ta. If I got good at that, I might try pattern number 2. Ta, ya, ta, ta, ta. Or this one. Ta, 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 ya. So you can see, right here I have some variations for you. There's many more. I wouldn't do all of them in one practice session. I would do 1 or 2 and repeat it until it feels like I'm on autopilot. If you hit one that tangles up your tongue, I would speak it first. Let's take a look at this one. Ta, ta, ya, ta, 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 ya, ta. You can speak it to yourself, as I just did. Speak it, repeating it till it feels easy. And then the part of your brain that controls your tongue sort of has it, and then you pick up your instrument and try those notes. So making articulation patterns a conscious part of your practice routine will improve your playing so quickly. It's a phenomenal thing for you to do. Another very important type of pattern for us as musicians on any instrument is rhythm patterns. A lot of people find rhythm easy. A lot of people find rhythm very tricky and may attach all kinds of judgments to that we as musicians tend to do. Yeah, I'm just not good at rhythm. Yeah, I don't have a good sense of rhythm. Let me say that if rhythm is something that you find challenging, it's actually one of the easiest things to fix. And again, I'll put some links to other videos that might help you specialize in this a little bit. But rhythm is patterns, and patterns can be learned so easily and put into the autopilot part of your brain. Let's look at a fairly easy rhythm pattern. 4/4 time, 4 quarter notes. Again, if you're very new to reading music, this might slow you down a bit. For most of you who've been playing a while, you could look at this rhythm, and if I said, here's our speed, clap this rhythm, you'd probably just go clap, 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 clap. 1, 2, 3, 4. That would almost feel like you're on autopilot because you've played this rhythm so much. All rhythms are like this. I could put a slightly harder rhythm in front of you, and my guess is That's not on autopilot for you. Not yet. Could I make it on autopilot? You bet I could. At first, my conscious brain would have to very slowly analyze that rhythm and count in, well, how much is each of those worth, and figure it out, and that's going to feel clumsy. But I would repeat it. I would clap it. At this point, I wouldn't even have my clarinet in hand. I would just clap that rhythm. So first, I consciously understand it. I clap it. I repeat it. Guess what? About 8 to 10 times. So if it's a really complicated rhythm, like the one I just showed you, or one that's not familiar looking to our brain, even though it's not a super hard rhythm, it certainly looks unfamiliar. If I saw it in music, I would at first go, whack, what's that? Until I figured it out. Again, probably in about 3 minutes, this rhythm could start to shift to the autopilot part of your brain. And the wonderful thing about that is the next time you encounter a rhythm like this in a different piece of music, that autopilot part of your brain recognizes it. And you don't have to quite go through that same panic in the same way that likely your autopilot brain recognized this as an easy, familiar, comfortable rhythm. If it didn't, it's probably because reading music's new to you, and it could feel easy very quickly just by taking the time to work on those patterns. So I'm going to recap a little bit here. This is how we've structured our practice session. Before we even play the first note, we're thinking about what makes a good sound and trying to have our first note make a good sound. Then we're doing some tone exercises such as long tones. Then we're going to work on figure patterns, scales, arpeggios, all sorts of things like that. Then we'll add some articulation patterns to it. Then we might give our lips a short break and just work on some rhythm patterns. After we do all of that, we've really warmed up our body and our brain to just be in a really excited learning mode, which is what we want. We don't want to be thinking about what we're having for lunch when we're trying to make beautiful music. Although if you really get things on autopilot, you could play a scale while you're thinking about lunch, because that other part of your unconscious brain will take care of it for you. Next, before you pick up your clarinet and play your favorite piece of music, I'm going to say if there's any music that you're working on that you feel isn't complete yet, to do this. Tough spots first. You know where they are. You know in that piece of music, there's that section where that one high note's really hard to play, or the fingering's really hard, or the rhythm, whatever it is, take that little spot and let's make it a point of finding a great way to work on that little section. And by a tough spot, I mean very small, no more than about 6 notes long. So if your tough section is 8 bars long, we're going to break it down into smaller pieces as a practice tool. If it's the fingering that's hard, we're just going to focus on fingering. And sometimes I'll do that without even playing the notes. I'll literally finger them. Might even set the clarinet on my knee like I'm doing right now and just practice the fingering. Maybe it's 2 notes that feel really hard. Maybe it's an awkward jump. I'm just going to invent one. I'm going to do octaves, high E to altissimo E. I might just finger that E, 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 E. And notice I'm repeating it, maybe 8 to 10 times until I feel like, oh, that feels pretty comfortable. Then I might try playing it. Now, the results might not be great. If my air's not good, maybe it won't sound so good. Yeah, it kind of squeaked out, but wow, were my fingers ever good? So it's like, okay, check, fingers are good. Maybe I need to do some air work on that. So I might use a practice technique like huffing, ha, 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 ha. This is not a technique I would use when I'm performing, but as a practice tool, if I have 2 notes that are far apart, I give them little bursts of air, because the truth is, when it's a big leap, our air needs to move a little bit differently. And somehow, huffing them helps calibrate our body a bit. So at first, I might notice, wow, that really high E sticks out. It's much louder than the lower one. So as I do my huffs, I'm going to bring out the lower one. I'm going to back off on the higher one. Until I feel like it's pretty balanced. Then I might have my air working pretty well. Well, I already fixed my fingers. Now let's try playing it normally. Let's say they're tongued. I won't do the huff now. I'm going to keep my air steady. My air will be steady, although it will change to make the notes sound balanced. That particular interval now feels a lot easier to me. It might be 2 notes our problem. It might be 5 notes together. Again, we isolate them and do it. And then we can start to dig into the piece and start thinking longer term things like, oh, what's that 4-bar phrase doing? And now perhaps We're just actually getting into the repertoire and really diving in. But I think there's value in just taking the little hard bits out first and really having some success on them. Here's what most people do. They pull out their favorite piece of music. It's a page long. The first line sounds great. Then they hit that really hard spot. They kind of stumble through it, cringing, wishing it was better. Oh, and then there's a nice part. Oh, I like that. Oh, hard part. And they get through to the end, and they've just maybe spent 5 minutes playing the piece. Maybe there's 5 or 6 kind of bad sections that they survived, but didn't really improve. And then they can say, wow, I just practiced 5 minutes already. Woohoo! And yes, it's true. And perhaps, and you're still improving as a player by doing that, but you're not really fixing those hard spots. So in some ways, doing them first is very satisfying, because then we go back and play through the piece and we can say, oh, whoa, that section was much better than when I was working on it yesterday. Look at that. Wow, I'm really improving. Then we feel proud of ourselves. We feel excited, and we move on from there. So it's really good policy to think about. After we work on our repertoire, I just think it's always fun and probably important to include in a playing session what I just call having fun. Well, hopefully we've had some fun along the way, but what I mean by this is we play some music where we're not really in analytical practice, get better mode. We've done all that work. We can feel really proud of the work we've done. Now we're just going to have fun. Might be putting on a recording of your favorite clarinetist, whether that's Ricardo Morales or Acker Bilk or Benny Goodman or Martin Frost, classical, jazz, klezmer, whatever it is, and just try and play along. Doesn't matter if you're as good as they are. The point is you love the music and you're trying to play it and you're having fun. Or maybe if you have another musician in the household, you're just playing duets, you're just jamming, you're improvising. Whatever it is, you're sight reading music that you think would be fun to play, just do some fun stuff, because you are attracted to this instrument because of the way it sounds and that you like playing. I really want to encourage you to be more mindful in your practice sessions. And notice I've just given you an order of things to work on. I'm not telling you how long to practice, just suggesting that you dive into each of these sections as you go, and it really will help you improve faster, which means you'll have more fun playing the music, less stress, and you're going to continue to improve at a rate that helps you build momentum and feels exciting instead of frustrating. So I would love to hear from you. You notice there's a comment section under this YouTube video, and that's your chance to ask me questions and perhaps add to this conversation. What do you do when you practice that really works for you? I know there's lots of professional players and teachers who watch the Clarinet Mentors channels, and there's people who are very new to it. All of you might have something that you'd like to contribute here, so please do. And I also have an invitation for you. If you're not already an official member of the Clarinet Mentors community, it's so easy to join and it's totally free. Just go to www.learnclarinetnow.com, and it'll ask you to put your name and email in to sign up for the Clarinet Mentors community. I send out a newsletter about once a month, sometimes it's more often, and I'll include a video like the one you're watching right now, and also some of my pointers and tips for playing clarinet better, my favorite pieces of clarinet gear, my favorite music, maybe notices of streaming live concerts coming up that I think most clarinetists would enjoy, or anything of interest to you as a clarinetist. If it's ever not a good fit for you, it's super easy to unjoin, so there's no commitments there, but I would love to see you within that community. It's a great group of people of all ages, all levels of experience. So thanks for watching today's video, and I look forward to seeing you soon on another Clarinet Mentors video.